on statements of
Recording
purpose.
has started.
Statements of purpose for graduate school applications. And feel free to ask questions as we go, as we are a small group. Oh, Christina, good, you were able to unmute yourself. That's concern there. Okay, so statements of purpose for graduate school. This is a commonly asked for document that you'll need. And talked a little bit about this. The event is being recorded. You're muted, unmute. You can type questions in the chat box, and then you've all put in your full names, which I appreciate because I will follow up with an email. So what is a statement of purpose? A statement of purpose is a specific genre of writing, and it's very common in grad school applications. And it's going to explain why you want to go to grad school and why you need to go. And also it gives you a chance to detail the reasons why you're qualified. And some schools will call this a statement of intent or a statement of motivation. So this is different than something called a personal history or maybe a personal statement, which is more personal. And I'll come back to that later. The statement of purpose focuses on your purpose for going to graduate school. One of those purposes is to get a graduate degree, but the larger purpose is what your goal is. For example, you want to earn a PhD so that you can run a research and development lab in the future. Or you want to you want to get a master's degree because in order to be successful in the field of public policy, you need to actually have a master's degree as an entry point into a career. So there are different reasons for going to graduate school. First thing you want to start out with any essay that you're writing is what the prompt is. And you're going to get the prompt from the application itself. Some differences that are important between undergraduate applications and graduate school applications. One of them is the type of question you'll answer. So can anyone here even remember what you wrote your application essay on to get into Georgia Tech? If only hear crickets, I'll assume that none of you are really kind of clear on that anymore, right?
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while, right? So my guess is that you wrote something that was pretty broad, maybe more creative, kind of flowery, literary type essay. Statements of purposes are not that. The prompts essentially ask 3 questions. And how those questions are asked differs among universities, but they're going to essentially ask you 3 questions, and I'll come to that in another. First and foremost, when you get the prompt from the application, you want to get the prompt from the application itself. You don't want to make assumptions. You don't want to go by hearsay or what friends have told you. You want to go to the applications, which will become available in the fall. September and October. So you're going to apply for grad school. Most grad school programs start in the fall. So you would apply the fall prior. If you wanted to go to grad school next fall, you'd be applying to grad school this fall. They're usually 1 or 2 pages. If you're not given any specifics about spacing requirements or font size or anything, then I recommend 1 to 2 pages, use standard margins, but check that there are no program requirements related to spacing, font size, and style. If there aren't, then I say go for single-spaced 11-point and utilize that real estate as much as possible. You want to first and foremost start out with the prompt. It's hard to answer a question when you don't know what the question is. Second thing that's different about undergrad and graduate school applications is who your audience is. So when you applied to Georgia Tech, your application went to the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, and the professionals in that office are from a variety of academic backgrounds, and it's centralized, and they're making decisions for the entire university. They're deciding if you're a good fit for Georgia Tech. They're not deciding if you're a good fit for a specific program, and faculty don't have a say in who gets accepted into Georgia Tech. So the first time that faculty in your respective majors saw your name was on a roster. Right? So they're not getting to make decisions about whom they teach. So the application process for undergrad is not major or program specific, it's university specific. When you apply to grad school, your audience completely shifts. Now the review committee members are actually faculty in the program that you're applying to. They're the professors that are going to teach you and that you're going to do research with. And now the faculty are making decisions for themselves. The experts in the field that you're applying to be in are the ones that are deciding if they want to admit you into their program. And that completely impacts the kind of writing you do. Going back to that more literary, creative style kind of writing for an undergraduate essay, your statement of purpose is going to be very specific. And it's going to be geared towards a specific audience, because that audience is also making admissions decisions. If you applied to a grad school at Georgia Tech, you would technically apply to the Office of Graduate Studies, and they check your application for eligibility, and they verify eligibility, but they're not making the application, they're not doing the application review. They're not the ones sitting over discussing you as a candidate for a spot. So I'm going to pause there and see what questions you might have at this point. Questions? Okay. So here's an example of a prompt. I took this from Stanford. I generally don't read from the screen, but I am going to read this one. Your statement of purpose should be concise, focused, and well written. Those three things apply to any statement of purpose you're going to write. It should describe succinctly your reasons for applying to the proposed program at Stanford, your preparation for this field of study, research interests, future career plans, and other aspects of your background and interests, which may aid the admissions committee in evaluating your aptitude and motivation for graduate study. And then it goes on. So the three essential questions that are going to be asked in any of these prompts, and notice that the wording is not the same. The questions here that I'm extracting from this prompt are not worded the same, but they have asked you what your goal is, which is future career plans. They want to know what work you've done towards that goal or what experiences have prepared you for grad school, which is what they're asking about, your preparation for this field of study, your research interests, and other aspects of your background. And then how Stanford can specifically help you reach your goal. They don't specifically word it that way, but they do ask your reasons for applying to the proposed program at Stanford. So these are three essential questions that you want to keep in mind when you're framing your statement of purpose. Even when you're doing your first draft, keep those questions in mind, because that's what you're going to have to answer. But you do also need to check with the prompt to see if you're being asked for additional things. For example, other aspects of your background and interests. That doesn't necessarily have to be academic or research oriented. You could be doing something outside of tech that's related to your field, or there's something in your background that's related to your field. I read a lot of documents, like hundreds and hundreds in any given year. And the most common struggle I see across applications is showing your audience and not telling your audience. When you tell your audience, what you are essentially doing is answering the prompt with a prose form of your resume. It's like you take your resume bullet points and you just turn them into full sentences. That's what telling looks like. When you show your audience, you are connecting the dots. You are telling the story behind those bullet points. How does one connect to another? How did one impact another? How did one experience lead you to want to seek more of that experience or make you not want to do that ever again, which is also valid to write about, but you gain skills that helped you be more prepared to do something else. So I'm going to read these to you because it also lets you hear this out loud. As a follow-up to our workshop today, I'm going to send you some resources that includes a lot of this, so I don't want you to feel like you have to frantically be taking notes or anything. I'm going to send you this in documentation form, and it's also on the pre-graduate advising website as well in the resource section. So here's the difference between telling and showing. In spring 2019, I led a class project as a student of Dr. Ima Lopez. Our project entailed developing an ergonomic blood testing kit for individuals with diabetes and limited hand dexterity. We used feedback from individuals who could benefit from the device to improve our design with each iteration. After that, I interned at Big Company and worked on, and then your statement would go on. So now I'm going to pause for a second. I want the three of you to read the showing paragraph, and then we'll chat a little bit about the difference. You want to just drop in the chat, it's like done or finished, so I know. Okay.
Susan, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm done too. I just can't
You're
find the
done.
chat.
Okay, perfect. So let's chat a little bit. What are some of the differences the three of you note between telling and showing? Anyone can chime in. You don't have to put it in the chat. Just unmute yourself.
I think one main difference between the telling and the showing verbiage is that it shows your interest in the project into greater depth, which makes me feel that this person is like genuinely interested in potentially pursuing like what in helping others in a sense is like what
Right.
I got from that.
Exactly, right. You hit it right on the head there, Maya. Like it's that interest in connecting all the dots. And it's essentially, as a reader, it's answering for me, why should I care about this? Or why are you telling me this? The telling is just, okay, you've told me, but yeah, what am I supposed to do with that information, right? Showing answers that question for a reader. Oh, we have another Joel, welcome. Joel, you're muted upon entry, but if you, we're a small group, so feel free just to chime in with your voice or in chat. This is being recorded, so if you don't want to have your chat or your voice recorded, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, hi. Sorry I'm late. I had a class that just ended.
Oh, that's okay. I know. It's life online. So we were just talking about the difference between showing and not telling. Anyone else want to comment, Christina or Gabriella, about, or to piggyback off what Maya said?
Maybe it's a bit more mature, the showing, like
Mm-hmm.
you elaborate your answer and connect it to your previous experiences,
Mm-hmm.
I feel.
Yeah. This is where you want to be in your statement of purpose. You want to avoid telling as much as possible. I could just look at your resume if you're going to do that. I can't look at your resume and get all of this out of it.
This is really interesting, Susan, because the showing is essentially the type of writing that was kind of taught, like the creative writing, telling a story. And I've worked in the corporate sector now for a few years, and they teach you to write the other way, like technical writing, just to get.
Oh, yes, they do. Yeah. When I said earlier about the creative writing for undergraduate applications, it's more of like journeys and paths and metaphors, and
Yeah.
That's not the place for this. This is creative writing in a different genre, and you're exactly right. In the corporate world, it's very much telling. Bullet point. I could take the telling paragraph and bullet point it, and it would say the same thing.
Exactly.
I can't bullet point a showing paragraph.
Exactly.
So you will, if you've had that experience already, the statement of purpose writing will perhaps come a little bit easier for you. All right, let's take a look now at what does it mean to customize your writing. So another aspect of your statement of purpose is you have to customize it. If I can replace the name of a university in your statement and put another one in its place, you haven't customized it. So remember those three essential questions you're essentially going to answer? What is your goal? What have you done to work towards your goal? How can Stanford specifically help you reach your goal? This is where you'll customize it. It's for number 3. So when you customize, you have to show how your interests and goals, think about that whole showing section, how they align with specific elements of the program. If you're applying for a master's degree, you still need to do this, but you don't have to align it with research that's going on, except if you're applying for a thesis-based program, a research-based program. If you're applying for a doctorate, doctorates are research degrees. And so you have to indicate 2 to 3 professors whose current research aligns with your interests. And it's really your interests aligned with their current research. Because that's also where I call that your funding paragraph. That's where funding will start to be considered. If you're going to get into a PhD program, it's going to come with funding. If it doesn't, that's a whole nother conversation. But you should be offered funding, and your indication as to where you hope that funding comes from in a PhD program is when you're talking about the professors that you hope to work with. And by the time you get to this paragraph in your statement of purpose, in your customization of your writing, I should already know where you might fit as a faculty review committee member, because you've done a lot of showing already. I should be nodding my head going, oh, Susan would be a great fit for Dr. Neal, or Susan would be a great fit for Dr. Rodriguez, or Dr. Choi should say, Susan would be a great fit for my lab. And by the time you get to, and I left you out, Joel, I'm sorry, didn't mean to do that. By the time I get to this paragraph, it's no surprise. But this is also the chance in your application when you can talk about other elements. So for example, I'll use Caltech. I work with a lot of students who are thinking about robotics. Caltech is logistically, geographically not far from JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab. They do a lot of work with NASA, and that would be an example. Like there might be particular partnerships with JPL, or an internship opportunity as a master's student, even a PhD student, or to be involved in projects that are associated with NASA. Those are specific to Caltech. What Caltech doesn't want to know, what Georgia Tech doesn't want to know, they don't want to know about themselves. So, for example, you don't need to tell the biomedical engineering department at Georgia Tech or the industrial engineering department that they've got some of the top programs in the country and world in their field. They know this about themselves. They want to know what specific elements of their top program appeal to you and will help you get to your goal. And that's where the customization comes in. If I can switch, again, as I said it before, if I can switch out the names of the universities, you haven't customized that part of your statement. I want to pause there and see what questions you might have about that.
I don't know if you've addressed this before I came here, but how technical can you get when you talk, like, who's going to be reading this? Is it going to be the person in the lab? Like, I'm applying for a PhD. Mm-hmm. Is the professor I'm applying to going to be reading it? In which case, should I be technical, or is it just going to be people?
Yeah, I did. I'll just go back to that slide. So yes, and I'm going to actually add that, Joel. Thank you for that reminder. I'm going to add that piece to this slide. Because your audience for grad school is very specific, it's actually the faculty that you're going to be working with. It's totally different from the undergraduate application process. That was a general centralized audience. Your audience here are the faculty that are in the program, and for that reason, you need to write technically. You need to show you know what you're talking about. You're not going to write at the technical level of a submission for an academic journal, but you should write at a high enough level of technicality that the faculty know that you're prepared to go into the work you say you want to go into.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, Joel, did you come in on this slide?
Yes, that's where I came in.
Yeah. So if I were actually going to put this into a resume, into a statement of purpose, I would actually make it more technical. This showing section, going back to your question, I would make it more technical, but I didn't for this particular, for this context, because not everybody has a technical background in diabetes research. But this is a starting point where you would go in and maybe specifically talk about the type of technical things you are working with. And that can include research skills. It can include lab techniques. For example, if you have wet lab skills, it can include the details of your actual research, so all the terminology. I have a classics background. I'm an ancient language person, and I read a lot of technical things, and I can read through them. I might not always know exactly what you're talking about, but I can follow your argument, if that makes sense. And that's what you want to keep in mind, that your audience will be technical, but they might not all have the same specialty. So that's why you don't want to write it at the level of a submission to an academic journal that people in that field would understand, but someone who isn't wouldn't necessarily.
Okay. So just to get a better idea, like I'm CS. If like one of my friends who's like BME was reading my statement of purpose, there should be some parts that they don't understand or can't exactly get.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If I were reviewing your document, which I'm happy to do for all of you, I wouldn't understand all the CS, and I'll read a lot of CS stuff.
Okay.
But I can still ask you very specific questions about how you're framing your argument or how you're wording your sentences. Sometimes, funny enough, I even catch mistakes in the technical language, not even knowing it, because I ask a question with an outside eye. So, all right. So, how many of you have a? Oh, go ahead. Question.
Sorry, I was clearing my throat, but I did have a question. I don't want to hold this up though.
Oh, what's your question?
So I just had a question about, so like when you're talking about your subject that you want to research that's in alignment with, say, a couple of professors to the program that you're assigned to, I guess how would you advise us to kind of work through like what we find on the publication sites for these professors? Because some of the work, like it might be stuff that they care about, but they haven't actually touched it in like 8 years.
Exactly.
So like, how do you know which citation of research is going to shoot you in the foot, and which ones will actually regurgitate an old topic that they actually want some energy around?
Right. So a few ways to do that is first look at their websites, but check if they're up to date. Okay. Check at the bottom when the page was last updated. Do you use Google Scholar to see where the current research is? Because to your point, you could be doing research that they did 8 years ago and they're no longer doing it. So if you say, I want to do research type A with Professor Rajakumar, right? And he's not doing that kind of research anymore. Well, remember, that's your funding paragraph.
Right.
And I've gotten this directly. I did a workshop 2 weeks ago with faculty. And that's one of the things one of the faculty members said. It was like, make sure we're still doing the research that you're saying you want to do.
Right.
Okay. So those are your starting points, is to do a little of that back end. You don't have to do any actual citations in a statement of purpose. It's not that kind of genre. You don't have to cite the professor or anything like that. In fact, if you do it's kind of, it just it doesn't look right because it's not supposed to be there. So, but you do. Oh, go ahead, Christine.
Sorry, no. Yeah, no. It's like you are talking about funding, but how do we know if they have funding? Because sometimes they don't.
Yeah, sometimes they don't. Yeah. So you can do some preliminary outreach to faculty members. Good starting point are the faculty members at Tech that you're doing research with, to see if they have colleagues in programs you're interested in. You can also talk to them about the programs you're interested in, and see if they can connect you by email. If they don't have colleagues in the particular program, or they don't have time, or they don't want to connect you for some reason, you can ask, would it be okay if you emailed the professor and CC'd them to make that connection?
Okay, thank you.
Before you reach out to a professor, though, if it's not through a personal connection with a faculty member that you know, either at Tech or another university that you've been to or you're currently at, go to the faculty web pages of the programs, read through their bios, and read through the program information, and make sure there's no notation that says something like, please do not contact faculty unless you've been accepted. I've seen this at Stanford, for example. I use the Stanford example. I've seen it at MIT, but you had to actually go into the PDF of the student program information to find out in their frequently asked questions that they, whether or not they encouraged you or not. But then I've seen Professor Georgia State, who flat out on his bio page said, if you're interested in this program, please contact me, and he lists what he wants from you. He couldn't have made it any easier. I wish all professors would do that, but they don't. So you got to do a little homework there, and then when you reach out to the professor, it's very short. It's what you're studying, what level of degree you hope to go into, and what your research interests are. And then you would ask if they foresee having any openings in their lab for new graduate students in, say, 2021, depending on when you want to start graduate school. That's a kind of an indirect way to ask, are you hiring? They can't offer you a spot right then. But if they come back and they say, to your point, Christina, no, my grant has run out, I'm not hiring anymore for 2 years, you now know not to put in your statement of purpose that you want to work with that professor. Because there's not going to be any funding for you.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're applying for funding from an outside source, like the National Science Foundation or Earth's Foundation, or there are other places to get money. Has anyone here met with Karen Murrah, the prestigious fellowships advisor?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did? Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I did too.
Okay. Excellent. So, Christina, you were the first person to say yes, right? And Joel?
No, it was me, Gabriela.
Oh, Gabriela. Okay. And then so Christina and Maya, if you haven't met with Karen Murrah, I'm going to put her name in the chat. She's the prestigious fellowships advisor. If you aren't applying right now, there still are some fellowships that might be open, but you can make an appointment through advisor link. And strongly encourage you to make an appointment with her so you can find out what additional funding you could get. That could fund a master's degree, or it could fund your research before you go on to a PhD or a master's degree. Lots of different opportunities where you could get funding. But the main support you want to get in graduate school is through being a graduate research assistant or a teaching assistant, or both. And in your statement of purpose, if you have teaching experience, you want to also write about that, because that can be a source of funding too. All right, let's talk about drafting. How many of you can get your writing started pretty quickly? Like your first draft, it tends to come to you easily. Okay, if the answer is not me.
Not me.
Oh, God, what are you talking about, Susan? Drafting. Okay. When you are thinking about how to draft a statement of purpose, I want you to put aside any way you've been trained to draft, and I want you to draft like you think. For most of us, those are different. For some of us, you were trained to think a certain way, and that's the only way you can think about your writing. But for a lot of advisees that I work with, they don't match. So what do I mean by that? I mean, like, if you visualize information in your head in the form of tables, that's me. I'm very language oriented, but I see a lot of information, I table it. If you need spreadsheets, I also do spreadsheets. Outlines, it's a very traditional way of drafting your writing. I don't think I've made an outline since I was a senior in high school, when I was forced to make outlines. I don't think that way. Bullet point journaling. So if you just think in bullet points, then that's how you draft. Remember, you've got the prompt with you, and you've got those 3 essential questions. Some people, if you're artistic, you might think in pictures or sketch notes, flow charts, sticky notes. You can even record your voice. And for some, free writing, like full sentences. But what I'm encouraging you to do is to draft like you think and not draft like you've been taught. Because sometimes drafting like you've been taught can actually be the roadblock for you to get your writing started. And don't worry about what your first draft looks like. It's a draft. You're not turning it in. So there's no judgment. There wouldn't be any judgment from me if I were helping you, and trying to step outside of the judgment of yourself, which I know is more difficult. I include myself in that. And also, it doesn't matter if you need 25 drafts. The important thing is you get it to completion, in a sense, to a completed point that you're proud of and that you feel represents you in the best way possible. My services are free. I have reviewed 3 drafts with students, and I reviewed up to 50 for multiple applications with the same student. It doesn't matter to me how many drafts you need and how much support you need. What the goal is to get you to where you're ready to click submit and you feel confident in your statement. I want to pause there and see what questions you might have at this point. How many of you, or tell me if you don't mind chiming in, how do you draft? How many of you draft like you've been taught, even though it's not like how you think? It's a hard habit to break.
I find that it's hard to identify my natural thinking style versus what I've been taught is what should be the natural way to think. So I don't know how to answer that question.
Right. Well, I think your answer is fair enough. I experienced the same thing. What I do know I don't do anymore is make outlines. I spent more time trying to remember, is it a Roman numeral? Is it a little a? Is it a little I? Is it a, I don't do it that way anymore.
Yeah, it's a very procedural way of outlines, but your brain may not think in a procedural sense to release it.
Right. Anyone else want to offer or chime in?
I think this is a really good idea. I think in flowcharts, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And yeah, I've never tried drafting like that or like putting my idea, like I put down like technical ideas in flowcharts when I'm thinking of stuff, but I've never done it with an essay or something.
Right. And Joel, if you're going to do this, let's say this is your prompt. These are your essential questions. This is where your flowchart starts. This would be the first block. Like you would have 3 levels of your flowchart.
Yeah.
And then you would just start flowing your thoughts out of that.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead. I missed the last comment. Gabrielle.
Yeah, I do concept maps usually for drafting.
Concept maps. I'm gonna actually add that. This list gets bigger as I talk to students. Okay, so let's take a look now. Let's say you've gotten your first draft done. Yay, celebrate. So some tips for revising your draft. You only have up to 2 pages. Single space or double space, it's going to depend on what parameters you've been given. As I mentioned earlier, if you've been given no parameters, then go single spaced, 11-point font, something like Times New Roman, which is a boring or traditional font, but you can get a lot more on the page than you can with Arial or Georgia or Calibri or these. Then those aren't the newest fonts. You want to say fewer. You want to say more with fewer words. Lengthy sentences. A little trick is you just highlight the whole sentence in your draft and see how many lines it is. If your sentence goes past 2 lines, you're kind of edging on losing a reader. Starting to become a paragraph. When you're writing about yourself, it's hard to avoid using the word I, but you don't want every sentence to start with I. So you want to alter your sentence structure, how you introduce sentences, the subject of your sentences. Make sure you're writing in your own voice. If you get help from a friend, or the communications lab is a great resource, you get help from me. I really try to stay focused on the fact that this is your story, not mine. And my language, my vocabulary, my writing style is going to be different than yours. So you want to make sure that you maintain your own voice in your writing. And save your drafts, every single one of them, until you are done. And then even then, you might have a great idea you come back to later for some reason. Smooth transition. So for those of you in technical fields, if you've done a lot of technical writing, lab reports, article submissions, the thing about academic journal research articles is that the transitions are there for you. They're in the headers. Abstract, background, participants, data collection, data analysis, further implications. And you don't have to actually use words to transition from paragraph to paragraph. You can stop your idea in its tracks, and then you have a new header, and you start the second idea. In a statement of purpose, you need actual transitions. You need transitional sentences. You need transitional words. Moreover, however, in addition. And so those are things to think about as well. And I find more often with students who are coming from technical backgrounds, it's not that you don't know how to do it. It's just you haven't had to do it probably since high school. Write in that way where you have to transition in your own writing and not through headers. Some strategies, and I'm going to, as I said at the beginning, I'm going to send you documents or a link to a bunch of resources that cover all this as well. If you work with me, I will read your statement out loud to you, unless you tell me, Susan, that absolutely drives me crazy. Please don't do it. I definitely won't do it. But the reason I read out loud to you, because it does make you listen to what you're saying, and it does make you reflect on, am I really writing what I'm trying to say? It's also a great way to catch errors. And you can do that on your own, too. Know what your takeaways are. What I mean by that is if I read a paragraph before I told you what I thought it was about, you should have in mind what you want it to be about and what you want my takeaways to be. What should my understanding at the end of a paragraph be about what you've just told me? And that's another way to guide your writing, guide your flowchart if you're thinking how to write, guide your bullet point journaling after writing. Think about, what do I want my reader to know about me and my experiences from this sentence, from this paragraph? I'll talk a little bit about color coding prompts and drafts in a bit, and then get help with your writing. So I've mentioned my team, pre-graduate and pre-professional advising, we are one of the only units on campus. In fact, we might be the only. I'm not sure if we are the only, but we're a rare breed on campus. We actually support undergraduates, graduate students, and alumni. So no matter where you are in your life, if you decide to go to graduate school, you've got us in your corner. You've also got the communications lab while you're an undergrad to get help with your writing as well. So let's talk about color coding. Before I show you color coding, has anyone used color coding in your drafts before?
I have not.
You have not. Okay. Anyone else? I like color coding. I think in color, my charts are sometimes color coded in my head. So, but let's look at color coding. I'm going to go back to that same prompt from Stanford. What I've done is I've color coded the different questions you're being asked. So those 3 essential questions, purple, blue, and green. So this is obviously not a full statement of purpose, but let's say this is a draft and it was a paragraph in my draft. And I now see I've spent a lot of time talking about my career plans, but then something I've sprinkled in research interests and I've sprinkled in reasons to go to Stanford. If this is some kind of introductory paragraph, that might work. But if this is in the body of your paragraph, it doesn't always work. Color coding across the whole statement can help you see, have you spent a lot of space, used up a lot of space talking about your career plans, which is not where the focus of your statement of purpose should be. It's going to really need to be in the blue section. So most of your statement of purpose should be blue if you were using these colors. And then the second biggest section will be the purple part. But the biggest section, like 2 to 3 times bigger than the purple section, is the blue part. When you're talking about your research, internships, preparation for your field of study, that would be your courses, your research, your experiences. Could even be study abroad if you were doing research elsewhere, different experiences that were related to preparing you for grad school. So the color coding of your draft, it's hard to do on your first draft. It's hard to color code while you're doing your first draft. But once you make a draft, you can go back and color code it. And it can give you a sense of, if I looked at your flow chart, if I looked at your bullets, or if I looked at your tables or your concept map, is what I've written, is it capturing everything that you've drafted out? And is it really emphasizing what needs to be emphasized? Your statement of purpose is not going to be a balanced statement. And by that, I mean, you're not going to have an equal amount of green, purple, and blue. The heaviest part of your statement is going to be the blue section, which is the preparation for this field of study. And so I don't know who in the audience eats sandwiches, but if you can imagine like a thin bread and a lot of filling in your sandwich, the bread would be the green and the purple, and then everything in your sandwich, the filling, would be the blue part, and that should be the biggest part. Unless you like a lot of bread. I don't like a lot of bread in my sandwiches. So, questions about color coding? It's a helpful tool. It does take some patience in doing, but it can be very helpful visualizing your data. And in this case, it's pretty, it's not very complicated visualization, but it does show you what you're writing about and if you're actually answering the prompt in all parts of the prompt. So I mentioned writing resources. The internet is full of resources, but it's also full of a lot of examples of other people's writings. And while I do think there's value in reading other people's statements, there are some pros and cons. The pros of reading other written samples is that you can get a sense of, especially if it's posted somewhere, or some graduate schools might post an example of a statement of purpose. I see law schools do this more, but some grad schools do it. But the pros could be, okay, that's what a successful statement of purpose looks like. And it can just give you a sense of how to go about things. But that's also a con, because now you've got someone else's ideas in your head, and you start to judge your own writing, your own style. Oh, I haven't had 20 research experiences across my time in college, and I'm not going to get in. And the spiral starts. So that's the con of it, is while you can get some good sense of what good writing looks like, it doesn't necessarily mean that your writing is bad if you don't write in the same way that that person does. There are online supports. OWL at Purdue is a great writing lab. They've got lots of resources, from grammar to actually how to cite. So if you're doing a research paper, how to cite in different styles. Grammarly is another. This is not an exhaustive list, but if you struggle with grammar. And then tech support. I mentioned I am available. You can make an appointment with me through AdvisorLink. If you are an alum, they have not thought of alumni yet, so you can't get into the system. So you just need to email me, and I'll set up an appointment with you. And then there's the Comm Lab. So these are great places to go to get free support in your writing. As I mentioned, I don't know if the Comm Lab supports alumni. I definitely do support alumni. What questions do you have now about anything we've talked about?
I have a question. Just, I guess I have two questions.
Okay.
One is really the technical, like how are the professors like looking at like applicants? Are they getting like bundles put together? Are they looking at everything online, or will there be physical copies?
That's going to depend on the school and the program.
Right.
A lot of programs use what's called rolling review, which means that as applications come in, they kind of clump them together, and then review committees get together across the time, moving up to the deadline, and they review.
Okay.
For programs that are quite large, when you have 100, 200 graduate students, that can be a more manageable way of doing it. Also with rolling review, that means they're considering earlier for spots. It doesn't mean you won't get considered if you meet the deadline, like say December 1st, and you turn it in on December 1st. Right. But it can mean that a bunch of applicants have already been reviewed, and they've kind of started to figure out where people will go. So I'm a strong believer in get your application in as early as you can, but not at the expense of it being as best as it can be.
Sure. Okay.
If you get it in on the deadline, you are still going to be considered. And some programs, especially smaller programs, so like I'm in a doctoral program, I think there are 25 students in the whole program. So it's not inconceivable that the professors waited until the deadline because there were only 25 applications. But only 25 spots. I don't know how many applications there were. If there are 10 spots and they know they're going to get 500 applications, I can guarantee you they're not waiting until December 1st to start those reviews. There's something called, I don't have it on the slide, but there's also something called the April 15 resolution. And this is an agreement among many universities that they won't require you, if you're given an offer of admission, to make a decision until April 15th if funding is involved. It's something I'll send it through the listserv. Is everybody here on my listserv? Bella, I think you're on the listserv. Joel, are you on the pre-graduate listserv?
I'm not sure. I'm checking right now.
Okay. Gabriella, are you on it? I can't remember.
Is that the pre-grad advisor list?
Pre-grad advisor listserv.
Yes, I am.
Gabriella?
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
And Christina, I think I put you on it. Are you on it?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure. Okay. I can check, and I will, if you want to be on it, I can put you on it. How did you find out about this event?
Ursula Reynolds.
Okay. So this is the kind of stuff I push through the listserv or events and things about like the April 15 resolution and stuff like that. So if you want to be on it, let me know.
Sure.
But the April 15 resolution gives you a chance as an applicant. Let's say you've got multiple offers. They're not forcing you to make a decision too early. Like let's say you get into Stanford and you're still waiting to hear from UT Austin and Georgia Tech, and they're saying, no, we need to know by March 1st, but you haven't heard from the other two schools. And so the idea is that the schools that commit to following this April 15 resolution won't require you to commit if money's involved. It has nothing to do with admission. It's just like if money is involved, they won't make you fully commit until April 15th. I don't know how I got on that, but something.
I've got a question.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had another. Oh, sorry.
All right.
Okay. I don't know who was first.
All right, Gabrielle, I saw your name come up first.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, you said like not to leave it for the last minute, right? So, for example, if I'm going to do the GREs like in mid-November, could I submit the applications and then have this course submitted like later on? Or until the scores are not there, the application is not submitted?
You need to find out if they will when they'll accept your scores. A lot of times your application, every part of it has to be turned in by the deadline.
Yeah, but I
including
mean,
your scores.
in the meantime, like for example, if the scores arrive the 28th of November, let's say, if I submit everything else before, will it be considered? Or
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. Sometimes they will review it, but they kind of put it on pending. I liken it to, have you ever been at a store or something and you're getting help? I don't know, you're returning something and there's an issue and the person might say, can you step to the left so I can help the person behind you while we solve this problem for you? Or you fill out this form and then you fill out the form and you step back into the front of the line. It's kind of like that. Sometimes they'll review it, but they'll put it to the left until they get the final piece and then they'll bring you back to the front of the line. So they might not make a final decision on you until they get your score.
Okay, thank you.
But you do want to make sure, find out when that score is due.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, if they're accepted after the deadline. Who had the other question? Was it Joel? Did you have the other question?
Yeah, it was me. So this is about the statement of purpose. So this might be a little bit specific to me, but I'm applying to quantum computing. And so what I'm wondering is, how specific do I get into like my future like research? Like, is it like do I put several different directions of research like proposals that I might do in when I get to college, or should I be just saying I'm vaguely interested in this area of quantum computing?
In the section, that blue section from my prompt coloring, when you're writing about your research, you can detail where you hope to go in your research in that same paragraph if you want.
Okay.
You can also do it in that paragraph about the professors, that you're showing how your current experience aligns with what they're doing, but also that there might be doing work that's related to where you hope to go.
Okay.
What you want to be careful of is that you don't come across saying the professor isn't interested in what you're doing. The professor is interested in what you can do in their lab and how you can help their research move along. They're not interested in a new graduate student coming in with all these ideas about newer research when you're just starting out. Like, that's where you would be with your dissertation.
Oh,
so
that makes sense.
And it's kind of hard to talk about without an example of your own writing, but there's a certain line you have to stay behind when you word it about where you hope your research will go.
Okay.
Let's say that it's a glorious day. It is a glorious day outside. But let's say it's even more glorious because you're about to finish your last application and you just need to do one final review. So some final review tips. One of them, and this is one thing, I actually learned this from a high school English teacher. It's one of the best things I've ever been taught about how to proof my writing, is to actually read your statement backwards. And I don't mean read it word for word backwards. I mean reading it sentence for sentence backwards. So here's the telling paragraph. In spring of 2019, I led a project, right? This is that telling project. Now when I proofread it, I'm going to read it backwards sentence by sentence. So I'm going to start here. And we use feedback from individuals who could benefit. Our project entailed developing an ergonomic blood testing kit. And then in spring of 2019. By reading it sentence by sentence backwards, what you're doing is you're taking your thoughts out of the flow of the content. Because you spent so much time with your draft, you're already anticipating what the next sentence is, which means that you kind of gloss over the sentence in some important ways, one of them being really looking for minor errors, misspellings, punctuation, superfluous commas, those kinds of things. And if you and I have been working together for a while, I might be doing the same thing because I've read the draft over and over again. Reading it backwards can give that final, oh my gosh, there's been a comma there and I never noticed it before. But reading it sentence by sentence takes it out of the flow of your thoughts and forces you to look at a sentence in isolation. Also, before you submit, you want to make sure you've met all the formatting requirements. Is your file named in the way they want you to? Does your name have to be on every page of your statement of purpose? Make sure you have the correct program name. There are sections of your statement of purpose that you will be able to use across applications, especially that research, background, experience section. Might have to tweak it, but you want to make sure that you've changed the names where they need to be changed. And then if you've gotten comments on your drafts or made notations or put old drafts underneath, you want to make sure that you've gotten rid of all those things before you submit. And then finally, celebrate. So I'd say today's the glorious day. It's even greater because you've just clicked submit on your 7th and final application for grad school. So don't forget to celebrate. Treat yourself to something or treat yourself in some way. Celebrate your success. Also, make sure you send thank you notes. Handwritten thank you notes are a gift in themselves. I know it's hard in these times. You can't just drop something off at someone's office, but taking the time to thank someone in email or through written. I have an envelope I keep in my desk drawer full of thank you notes, and when I'm having a bad day, I actually pull it out. I go, yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm making a difference here. So those thank you notes, and then make sure you follow up with anybody that's helped you. If you're a musician, it's like not finishing the chord. Complete the loop for the people that have helped you. Let them know what's happened, and it's okay if you don't get in. They were still a part of your life for a brief moment to help you get to where you could submit that application. So don't forget the people that help you along the way, and just let them know where things end up. And don't forget to thank them as well. What other questions do you have? That's actually the end of the workshop, but we've got time for more questions. Oh, I'm 1 minute early. Look at that. That's perfect. As I said, I am going to follow up with an email, and I'll send you those resources virtually so you can have them. Christina, I'll check to see if you're on the list. Or do you want me to put you on there if you're not?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And I just have one question about what the professors want to, I guess the professors, I'm sure they're reading a ton of these statements of purpose, and I'm wondering, do they want to, or I guess, read someone's story, or are they looking a little bit more for a structured, I guess, analytical approach? I guess, are they anticipating what they would anticipate in academic structure, or are they a little bit more free-minded in letting you drive the story and how you tell it?
You can structure it in the way that's most comfortable to you. A common way to structure it is you block it by paragraph, depending on what part of the prompt you're answering. Some writers like to interweave parts of each prompt section into the same paragraph. I tend to find that doesn't usually work, but it depends on how good of a writer you are. One train of thought is that if you make it very clean cut, paragraph by paragraph, it's easier for the readers to follow. When you write it in a more creative way, it requires more brain power. So what I want you to think about is I want everybody here to imagine that your application is the last one in the pile. The review committee has reviewed 30 or 40 applications, and it's just before lunch, and everybody's tired and hungry. And now they're reviewing your application. So what's the easier thing to read? Is it the one that's more straightforward? Or is it the one that's kind of interweaving and you have to think more about, are they answering the prompt?
Right.
It's not necessarily an exciting way to write, but it's a very effective way to write, given who your audience is. So I always think everybody that's going to read this essay is going to be tired and it's before lunch, or they haven't had their coffee yet. So which one is going to get a better reaction?
Good context. I appreciate that. Okay, I have a 1 o'clock, but I have to run. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Christina, for joining us. Anyone else have a last minute question before we sign off? Make an appointment with me, everyone. If you haven't, make another appointment with me. We've already met. Some of you, I know I'm going to meet with you privately for the first time. Some of you I've already met. So I look forward to hearing from all of you.
Also, thank you for the session.
Oh, you're welcome, Maya. All right. Bye, Joel, and bye, Gabriella.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Susan.
You're welcome.